Hi, I'm Mark Salisbury. I'm VP of Technology and Operations for a Midwest staffing company. So I decided to join the military in my late teens.
Mark Salisbury is very proud of the time he served, and he is anything but regretful of his decision.
Overall, I met a lot of great people in the service and had a lot of good experiences. It added something to my life, and it certainly, looking back and knowing that I can say I was in the military, I did serve my country in that way. That feels good.
Having both basic and advanced trainings out of the way, Mark Salisbury was offered a spot in Operation Bright Star. This is an operation done primarily with Egypt, and it's an attempt to simulate for the soldiers what it's like to work with different militaries.
We went to Egypt and were stationed in Egypt and acted like a battalion for that length of time. And one of the first things we saw was a closed Pizza Hut and Kentucky Fried Chicken stand. We were stationed in Cairo initially, then spent time at the port of Alexandria, which is on the coast, the northern coast of Egypt. And we got to engage both with Egyptian and other forces, which at that time our job was to patrol a port and to really offer aid and assistance to anybody at the port from a military standpoint that needed help. We met with Egyptian general every morning at the port to talk about what the day would look like, what the events would be. We planned all that out. I got to drink tea with them, and it was interesting because all of our Egyptian counterparts in that situation all spoke very good English. They were, in fact, mostly all trained at American universities or educated at American universities. That was very interesting, as I was still in my mid 20s at the time. So the first time I had really been abroad, outside of the U.S. and seeing how people lived in Egypt, understanding what that meant, and meeting other people, who grew up very different than I grew up was a great experience, and it was a very good experience. The people really were good, um, interesting to talk to. Were open and inviting to who we were and what we were doing, and it was that was a very pleasant time.
While serving actively in Operation Bright Star, Mark Salisbury recalls a memory which he thinks he will never forget.
One day we were asked to help move troops from a helicopter landing pad to a ship. And that took up the bulk of the day. We had Humvees and we were driving 5 or 6 people at a time. Of course, I was driving. I wasn't paying a lot of attention to who I was transporting, trying to keep aware of the situation and make sure that we were doing good transporting the troops. So it turned out after about a half day of moving troops back and forth from a helicopter to a boat that this happened to be a French Foreign Legion ship. We were invited aboard. About 6 of us were invited to come on board the ship. They gave us a tour of the ship, and we met a large number of the people that we transported. So they were part of the French Foreign Legion, which is an interesting military concept. I'm not sure that we have anything like it in the U.S. military. So that was an incredibly diverse ship of people, and I was a 20-some-year-old Ohio Army National Guard. Comparing the type of physical shape I was in to these professional soldiers, in what to me seemed to be a very hard, very fit, very military organization was impressive. They were a very impressive group of people. They invited us aboard their ship. They thanked us. They actually took us to the officers' mess and shared a beer with us. Very memorable experience again to meet those people, to see a whole different side of the military that we didn't know from the National Guard, from what we see day in and day out. So, hey, we got to do some really cool things too. We got to go to the Cairo Museum of Ancient History, which was very very cool. Probably the most international place, even to this day. Probably the most international place I've ever been. You can stand in one place in the museum and hear 12 different languages being spoken all around you by the tour guides. Saw the pyramids, saw the Sphinx. So, I mean, again, some very, very cool once in a lifetime type experiences.
While in Egypt, Mark Salisbury shares his experience with the pyramids.
Still extremely impressive. it is kind of touristy. It is a kind of tourist area, and so there's people selling. There's people selling camel rides and those types of things. It's almost a little bit of a, like a carnival type atmosphere or something like that. So it's very cool. It is a once in a lifetime. How many people get to say that they've seen the pyramids? But perhaps I was expecting something a little bit bigger, a little bit more dramatic. But wow, I mean, it is still a once in a lifetime thing to see.
Mark Salisbury served in the Ohio Army National Guard for 9 years. 7 of those were active service, and 2 were inactive. He keeps the memories of his service in his mind, and he knows it's something he will never regret.